Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone doing? Let me get this room organized. Making Ian co-host here. And there is Roger. Boom. Hi, Ian. Very well, very well. How are you?
Fantastic. Just finished a space with Elon Musk.
Beautiful.
Yeah, went well.
What was it about?
Well, at first we had an interview with Mark Andreessen, and then we talked about a whole bunch of different things. I mean, Mark is a fantastic guy. You should have him on one of your spaces at some point in the future. We went over business, went over AI, like you couldn't talk too much about certain things because, he's got investments in those things, but what he could talk about was great, right? And then we had Elon on, he just joined on, and, we just shot the shit, I would say. Yeah, asked a few questions about the AI. Well, not really AI, but like the algorithms with Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Fantastic.
that's good. Yeah.
Hey, Roger, how are you?
Excellent. Delighted to be here.
Hey, Roger, how's it
Very
going?
nice.
I don't think we've spoken before.
No, this is the first time.
First time for everything. Awesome.
All right. Let me just arrange the room a little bit, let it all fill up a little bit. Give me like 2 minutes and then we get started. Let's see, who else do we have here? Okay, I'm almost ready. Ian, if you see anyone that you want to move up, be my guest. No worries. I let you do
Absolutely.
most of the hosting because
Yeah.
I'm going to start this thing by just running some questions by Roger, and when I'm done with that, then I would like to open the floor and let everyone chime in. But in the meantime, try and be civil, try not to interrupt, because there are a couple of things that I would like to talk with Roger about first.
Yeah, so I'll be the janitor. I'll be the janitor in this one.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, Roger, should we dive right into it?
Fire away.
So first of all, welcome back to Twitter. How does it feel to be back?
What a long, strange trip it's been. As I think most of you know, I was banned for life in 2017. I was a pioneer in that regard. Twitter never actually told me which of my offensive tweets they found offensive, but I had a large and vibrant following. In those days, Twitter was actually fun. You had repartee. Obviously, you had some trash talk, but there was a lot of back and forth, and it was entertaining. It was fun. It was educational. But then, obviously, because I am a Trump supporter, because I question certain news narratives, because I would push back on specific issues and topics, I was banned for life. At the time I was banned, I think I had about 890,000 followers. That's a guess, of course, because I was locked out of the account and couldn't even see it.
And so has your account been restored with all your previous followers intact?
No, when the account was restored, it had, I'm going to guess, around 125,000, maybe a slightly larger. It has grown to be more than 300,000 last time I looked. I urge people to follow me. Prior to being reinstated, somebody had posted a profile under real Roger Stone, who was definitely not me. They copied my picture and my profile from another social media platform. And surprisingly, they weren't banned. When I had, shortly after the acquisition by Elon Musk, to whom I am very, very grateful for my reinstatement, I almost immediately posted, just to make a point, a new profile think I called it Roger Stone USA. It was banned within an hour. It was suspended. I didn't really think that it wouldn't be suspended. I just wanted to make a point. But for whatever reason, real Roger Stone began to pick up steam, and I guess a lot of people thought it was me. It was not me. And then my lawyers, at my request, my lawyers contacted Twitter. They took that account down. Then I went through the prescribed steps to apply for reinstatement. And then, to my surprise and delight, I was reinstated. I don't know Mr. Musk. Didn't lobby anybody. I prayed about it. I filled out the forms. That's about it. And it's nice to have my voice back.
Yeah, good. And when I checked advanced Twitter search yesterday to prepare for this chat, I was trying to see what tweets you had made about Trump in the past, and they didn't come up. There were only 3 tweets that you made with the word Trump in it in the last few days. But your past history seems to be gone. So, I think it would be nice if Twitter, when they do reinstate accounts, also reinstate previous followers and all the tweet history of that user, because if that remains gone, it's not really a full reinstatement, is it?
Well, that's interesting. When I was first reinstated, I was able to go back and look at some of the things I tweeted, and actually commented on it in some interview. Said, "Wow, I said some really stupid things." I also said a lot of things that I would post again today. So I'm being somewhat more judicious about it, but I'm also, having gone through what I have been through, I'm a different person than I was. This was over 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
And you also can't remember everything that you did or did not say. Anyway, I'm glad to be back. It's still a great platform, and we've learned so very much in the last couple of weeks. In my case, I essentially learned confirmation of things I already thought in many cases, but wasn't positive of. But I think Elon Musk has been courageous, and he has taken a lot of slings and arrows for his commitment to free speech. His critics, of course, have it exactly backwards. The threat to democracy is not letting people speak. The threat to democracy is limiting free speech. It is not extending free speech.
Yeah. Do you agree that Trump should start using Twitter as his primary channel again and keep Truth Social as a backup?
Well, first of all, Truth Social as a concept. I mean, I have an account there. I'm active there. If you want to speak to, principally conservatives, Trump supporters, Republicans, libertarians, free thinkers, Christians, it's a great platform. Reaches a lot of people, works relatively well, but I think it is self-limiting in a way. There's some trolls there, and you just block them. It doesn't matter. But by definition, it appeals to a certain niche market. Uh, Twitter obviously should be open to everybody, right, left, center, vegetarians, non-political people, anybody. And if you look at the difference, I think at one point Trump had 83 million people following him on Twitter. I think today he has 3 million people following him on Truth Social. Yes, I think he should return to the platform. I hope that he will return to the platform. This would be speculation on my part and nothing more. Maybe he has some kind of exclusivity agreement with Truth Social. I don't know that he does. I don't know that he doesn't. He clearly has a financial stake in it.
With his art of the deal, I'm sure he has some exit clause in case his Twitter account gets reinstated. I mean, he has a massive account reinstated with all of his followers. I think he's wasting an opportunity by not taking advantage of that.
I would like to see him back on this platform, so I agree with you.
Hell yeah, me too. I mean, he was a powerhouse on this platform. He was using it before most people, right? I mean, he the reason so many people even know about him is because he used Twitter. He was one of the first celebrities to actually, tweet in real time the way that we're tweeting today.
Well,
and it was his way to get around the media blockade and how they treated him. He just became his own media.
Well, actually, I think I am the person who explained this to him. One of his great real estate and business rivals in New York City was Mort Zuckerman. And Mort Zuckerman may still own, but at the time he owned the New York Daily News. And the New York Daily News was, and I think still is, hemorrhaging money. I mean, it's hemorrhaging money. But Mort Zuckerman had the editorial page to state his opinions. I explained to Trump that Twitter was an opportunity to state your opinion. It was much bigger than the Daily News in terms of the number of people it reached. And here's the part Trump really liked. It was free. It was free, cost you nothing. So it was like owning a newspaper. It was a little more limited in terms of the number of characters, but it was free, it cost you nothing, and you could communicate with everybody, something one of his rivals was paying millions and millions of dollars for the privilege to do.
Yeah. Roger, is it fair to say that as a political operator, you are more like a UFC fighter than a traditional boxer? I mean, you don't mind grabbing your opponents and slamming them head first into the ground, right?
Well, I'm prepared to do anything that is legal to elect my candidates. Yes, and I understand that in America, politics is a contact sport, always has been in our entire history. I mean, people made up, rude flyers about Abraham Lincoln and handed them out. But there are obviously limits. Politics, I'm sorry, it was more civil 30 years ago. I mean, I had friends who were in the same business as I was, who were Democrats, who handled candidates. We would eat together, we would drink together, we would tease each other. Sometimes we would beat them. Other times they would beat us. We would laugh and say, "I'll get you next time." Everybody did the best they could for their clients. But there was still a certain civility and camaraderie about it. That I don't think exists at all today. They not only want to defeat you, they want to send you to prison. They want to bankrupt you. And it is, I don't, I'd rather at this juncture, in all honesty, write about and talk about politics rather than engage in it. I don't expect to do another presidential campaign. I don't actually expect to do, I don't rule it out, obviously, but I'm not actively seeking campaign, consulting gigs, strategic gigs. What I did find is that, and you've seen this before, Trump brought a large number of people to politics who had no prior political experience. And a lot of people do not understand that a modern political campaign, whether it's by a Democrat or a Republican, is a completely data-driven, scientifically based exercise in which you use sophisticated survey research to examine issues, concepts, ideas, positions, standing, but also to examine how people are receiving their news. Republican primary voters get their news from different sources than, say, Democratic primary voters. General election voters get their news from different sources than primary voters. A lot of people think, a lot of people who are new to politics think, well, I'm going to run for Congress. You get some yard signs made. You run around and talk to the same 3,000 activists in your community or in your jurisdiction. You knock on some doors, and that's a campaign. And that is not a campaign. So, particularly with the advent of digital advertising, with the maturity of the internet, running a campaign for public office at the statewide level, at the congressional level, has become a much more complicated, much more expensive, in some regards, much more expensive endeavor. On the other hand, prior to the advent of the internet, the single most efficient way to reach voters was network or network affiliate television, which was extraordinarily expensive. The internet, particularly Facebook, brought you the ability to geo-target voters based on not only geography, but also to target them on the basis of interests. And therefore you could reach the age bracket or the geography or specific sets of voters. So in many ways, Facebook, particularly, but also all digital advertising, democratized the process with a small d, and made it much, much more affordable. Therefore, if you were running for Congress in Long Island and you couldn't afford New York City television, or if you were running for Congress in the suburbs of Los Angeles, you certainly couldn't afford Los Angeles television rates. So, in a way, the internet made campaigns more efficient, and to an extent, they made them more affordable. Also,
Yeah.
also
I watched a documentary about the Facebook data and how it had been used in Donald Trump's first presidential election. I mean, there was, of course, quite a bit of criticism how the data has been used. Were you involved in that?
I was not. I had no formal role in Trump's 2016 campaign. I've seen that. I've read quite a bit about it, but I have no firsthand knowledge about it.
I mean, it was definitely a sophisticated strategy, but kind of on the edge of what one would think is appropriate. But the Twitter files show that the Democratic Party is using dirty tricks now to win elections, right? It's obvious. I mean, they use the media manipulation, they use big tech censorship, there are documentaries about ballot manipulation and so on. Why do you think they're engaging in dirty politics?
Well, because for the first time in the history of the country, you have a situation in which all mass communications, not just the internet, but all mass communications are controlled and censored. We've never had that before. But it doesn't matter whether it is network television or cable television or print media, newspapers, magazines, or the internet, or increasingly corporately owned radio, as the little mom and pop independent radio operators are slowly being squeezed out. You have one monolithic establishment media, and they have one narrative. And as long as they have one narrative, for example, the truth and the authenticity of, say, Hunter Biden's laptop contents can be suppressed. So it's not just that it was suppressed on Twitter, but it was suppressed essentially everywhere.
It feels to me that the Democrats and the Republicans are in a state of, let's call it a constant election war. And after each election, the war continues by smearing the opposition with investigations, scandals, and so on. Each side is using dirty tactics to get ahead. And while they're so occupied with fighting each other, the American people are the biggest losers in all of this because nothing gets done. Their lives don't improve. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I guess I don't. What I think is that there is a uniparty. The real division in American politics is the insiders and the outsiders. That the Republican Democrat divide is kind of a Hegelian device. Look, this is speaking to someone who is a former young Republican national chairman who grew up in the Republican Party of Goldwater and Reagan, and have great affection for the party as an institution, as the conservative party. But the truth is, there's one party, it's the establishment party, Somebody like Donald Trump comes along. He is a threat to that duopoly that has very cozy arrangements in Washington, and who has presided over the decline of the country. Take, for example, the fact that both parties overwhelmingly support sending $100 billion to Ukraine. That's not a
Yeah.
that's not a partisan issue, and that's a bipartisan decision. I don't think it reflects.
Oh, when it comes to wars, the uni party, as you call it, always agrees to that type of spending because obviously the military-industrial complex has politicians on both sides. And when you look at the voting patterns, it's quite obvious that when it comes to never-ending wars, both parties are always in agreement.
Seems like it needs some change, right? Someone like Harmeet Dillon, someone who represents populism in the party versus someone who just listens to lobbyists. I think that would make a change. I mean, what do you think, Roger?
I listened to that Twitter space last night in which she spoke, and I was very, very impressed. I was extraordinarily impressed. I don't know her. I have respected her based on what I've read and seen, but it was limited. But I was very impressed with her last night. I do think, again, the Republican National Committee upcoming election is very much an inside game. That you have 163 votes when you include the votes of representatives from the territories. There's a chairperson and a national committee man and committee woman from each state. The committee men and the committee women are chosen differently in each state. Some places they're elected by the state committee, some places they're elected by a state convention. It's not the same in every state, but they are politicians. They have a long-term interest in their own survival. It is very rare, and she hit upon this and is quite impressive. It's very rare that they hear from anybody at the grassroots. If you look at the average national committee person, in many cases, probably most cases, they've been there for a long time. People do not rotate in and out of these positions. And they are still subject at some level under each different state party to the will of the voters, the will of the party members. And I would like to see her succeed. I think that the entire Republican National Committee has become too cozy, and there's too much focus on making money and not enough focus on winning elections.
Her idea to take it out of DC looks interesting to me, just to spread it out across the country a bit more. I think that sounded like a good idea.
Well, look, if I were a major donor to the party, I'd like to see an audit of where the money's gone, both soft money and hard money. I'd like to see. I mean, they raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. If I were a major donor, even if I were a minor donor, I'd like to know where that money's going. That would be a very good start. And then secondarily, the party has developed, very sophisticated voter and donor databases. I'd like to know who owns that data. Is that data owned by the Republican National Committee? Is that data owned by a private company outside the Republican National Committee? These are things that I'd like to know that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
I think she would get to the bottom of all that.
So I want to go back to the state of election wars. You said 30 years ago things were different. It wasn't as bad as it is now. I look back at the 2000 election, and the Democrats were quite loud about that and saying that it was stolen from them. If I remember correctly, in the 2000 presidential election, George W. Bush won against Al Gore by 537 votes in the Florida recount. And knowing your history, this has Roger Stone written all over it. Can you confirm that the efforts in Florida had your fingerprints? Were you involved in that at all?
This has been publicly reported. Yes, I was definitely involved. I mean, in all honesty, Al Gore and his handlers made one fundamental mistake, which was they should have asked for a recount of every county. And had they done that in that canvass, I think there was a greater probability that they would have pulled ahead. This idea that I was responsible for shutting down the recount in Miami-Dade is false. There was an attempt to recount the same group of ballots for the third time to try to pick up additional votes. In many cases, ballots were spoiled, and you couldn't discern who the voter had meant to vote for because they had voted for two people on the same ballot, or their marking was not within the circle where it was supposed to be. But Jim Baker, former Secretary of State, former Secretary of the Treasury, the man brought in to run the recount operation for George W. Bush, I think correctly recognized that it was going to be an inherently political brawl. And the Democrats, I think, made a number of strategic mistakes.
But could this have been the time, right, when that happened, where the Democrats felt, we need to go dirty if we want to win future elections? I mean, could this have triggered this entire election war situation that we are in now, that they are saying, we felt that wasn't fair, and that's why we also have to take the gloves off and become UFC fighters as well?
You can go all the way back to 1960. I've written an entire book on Richard Nixon, but I specifically focus on substantial evidence that the 1960 election was stolen, not just in Illinois, but also in Texas. I had to go find on microfiche a really extraordinary series of articles written then by the New York Herald Tribune, which are not available online, where extraordinary documentation of that election theft, in my opinion, was really laid out. That in turn, I think, also is what led us, in a strange way, to Watergate. In other words, I think Nixon himself was scarred by that experience. He had been a two-term, 8-year vice president. He was the heavy favorite in that contest. He made a series of foolish blunders in the campaign. Should never have debated the lesser-known Kennedy. He did husband his resources and his funds to the end because he had to. The Kennedys had free range with money, and they used it for Madison Avenue style advertising. It was very new and very effective in those days. So, I mean, you could make a case that it goes all the way back to then. I think we've had election fraud in the country throughout the country's history. We've had disputed elections throughout the country's history.
Yeah, but then when you look at today, these election wars are so counterproductive, right? They achieve nothing for the voters. It's just a waste of time and energy rather than focusing on the issues that need to be fixed. So my question to you, as a veteran in US election wars, how would you say this broken system can be fixed so that politicians actually achieve something again for Americans and not focus so much on, dirty politics?
Well, if they can count 34.5 million paper ballots in France in one day, we could certainly have paper ballots here. I would return to paper ballots. I would have the election on one day. I would have absentee balloting based solely on a legitimate reason why one cannot be present at the polls, infirmity, illness, or sometimes some states allowed it to be done for work-related reasons. I would not have mail-in ballots. I think, as Bill Barr said on CNN in an interview with Wolf Blitzer, they're an open invitation for fraud. I don't know why we have early voting. I don't know. I think we should have our elections on one day. I think that paper ballots, are entirely traceable. We would know without any doubt who won and who lost the country could then move on. I think all of those things that I just outlined are highly unlikely to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem are, in my mind, the voting machines, because the deep state is now more involved in politics, obviously, because that's where their bread and butter is. If they want to go to war and shuffle some money to the military industrial complex, they need to have the right candidates in play, the right puppets that they can move around. So, voting machines to me always looked like a terrible idea because the deep state can manipulate every mobile phone to turn it into an open mic and has backdoors in every PC software imaginable. What makes anyone think that they can't do that with voting machines?
Well, in 2016, just prior to the election, I wrote an op-ed piece that was published by The Hill, in which I expressed concerns about the fact that computerized voting machines could be manipulated, certainly through a central server. And I was viciously attacked by Hillary Clinton's campaign and by her allies. And then after the election, after Trump was declared the winner, the Clinton campaign legally sought recounts in Michigan, Pennsylvania, I think the third state was Wisconsin. But their argument in their briefs was that the computerized voting machines had been manipulated, precisely what I'd said before the election. They're not supposed to be connected to a central server. They're not supposed to be online and widely acceptable, except for we've learned in some states they are.
Mm. You mentioned earlier that you're not seeking to be involved in Donald Trump's next campaign, but if he would ask you to play a role in the 2024 presidential campaign, would you be interested?
I don't think I'd have a choice. I mean, I'm here and breathing thanks to him. It's I'm not sure how one lies under oath about Russian collusion when there's no Russian collusion to lie about.
Yeah.
A violation of the False Statements Act requires materiality in some underlying crime. I was lying to protect Donald Trump. Protect him from what? They never found any evidence of Russian collusion. The idea that I was a go-between for WikiLeaks was not proven at my trial. No evidence to that effect was presented. So it was quite an experience, and I'm writing a book about it. I've written 5 books. This will be my 6th book. Obviously, I would probably not be here, but for the commutation of my sentence and the subsequent unconditional pardon. People still insist I was a Russian spy when I run into them on the street. There's no evidence of that. That wasn't alleged at the trial, nor was it proven at the trial, and it is false. The idea that I'm pro-Russian is absurd. I had relatives mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. I think Putin is a thug. I have no truck for his authoritarian system or the way he operates. But I don't expect that request to come. I'd rather write about and cover the campaign than be a warrior.
Yeah.
I don't expect to be asked.
So here's one thing that I wanted to ask you, because you're so deep into politics in the US. I would like to have an honest discussion about the financial state of the United States and the limited financial abilities any future US president will have, right? The US national debt is now at 31 trillion. US total debt is at 93 trillion, and US unfunded liabilities are at $173 trillion. All of this combined is more debt than all US assets combined. I mean, everything that everyone owns in America, right? So the US government had a surplus for only 4 years in the last 52 years. And the combined amount of that surplus is $660 billion. That's not even enough to pay 1 year of interest payments on all the current debt. What are your thoughts on that? Where is the U.S. heading?
I just assume that they print money as they need it. I mean, the idea that we are giving $100 billion to Ukraine, for example, I'm not clear on where that money comes from. Which budget line item are we taking that from, or are they just printing it and sending it? I don't look. I'm not a financial expert and don't claim to be one, but I don't ultimately see how that kind of debt is sustainable in the long term.
Well, I mean,
And
that is what the U.S. government has done over the last 10 years. It printed endless amounts, trillions upon trillions of dollars. That's why we have inflation right now. That's why the whole world has inflation right now, because the U.S. is doing that on the backs of other countries, because it controls the world currency, the U.S. dollar, right? But we're now facing the de-dollarization of the global financial system, right? The US dollar will no longer be the global reserve currency, because other big economies are starting to smarten up and they trade in other currencies. So if the US can no longer print money on the backs of other nations, this house of cards comes crashing down, doesn't it? I mean, it's
it would.
inevitable.
Well, it seems so. And of course, the great irony of this is that Republicans, particularly, have run as fiscal conservatives, have talked endlessly about balanced budgets and cutting spending and so on. But nobody spent more than George W. Bush. Nobody. I
Yeah.
mean, he is the biggest spender of them all. So
the point that I'm trying to make here, Roger, is neither Trump nor any other future US president can prevent this collapse, right? I mean, the US government is literally bankrupt as it is. Why even bother running for president? I mean, make America great again is not going to happen at this point.
I'm not an economist, and I believe with Jesus all things are possible. But it seems to me that our current debt and our current fiscal situation is unsustainable in the long term.
Yeah, well, it's already at the breaking point. Who should Trump pick for vice president, do you think, and why?
Well, you couldn't possibly make that decision now because traditionally, the selection of the vice president in both parties is made at the end of the nomination contest because you don't know how the nomination contest went, and therefore you don't know what you need, who the person you need, either geographically or in terms of appeal to a specific group of voters. So that's a decision you couldn't possibly make prior to your securing enough delegates to be nominated and seeing how that went. So, for example, in 1952, Robert Taft, a conservative, went to the National Convention with enough votes to win on the first ballot. The Eisenhower forces, through a very clever thing called Stop the Steal, unseated Taft delegates in 3 states, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, seated Eisenhower delegates. Eisenhower was nominated. Party conservatives were very upset. The advice given to Eisenhower was pick a conservative, a young conservative, for your running mate to bind up the wounds of the party and pull all the Taft people in. That's how young Richard Nixon went in 6 years from being a House member to being vice president of the United States. I should say, went in 6 years from leaving the Navy to being vice president of the United States. That is, by anybody's calculation, a meteoric rise. But you didn't know prior to the selection of a presidential nominee what kind of nominee you needed for vice president to bind up the party's wounds. You couldn't possibly say today who Donald Trump or any other Republican would need as a running mate until you see how the nomination contest goes.
Well, it was a bit of a trick question. Let me tell you why. I think that Don Jr. needs to run as a backup candidate, because if Donald Trump wins the nomination, I think there's a real risk that the deep state will try and JFK him. Because he now knows all the tricks of the deep state. He has had such a steep learning curve with all the roadblocks that they put him into his way last time. I think they are no illusion if this guy gets into power again that they are all gone.
But remember that the Electoral College doesn't prohibit, but essentially would penalize a party ticket where both candidates for president and vice president are from the same state. So, for example, if and many people
move him to Florida. You can help him.
I think they do both live in Florida. That's precisely the point.
Oh, really? Oh no.
Yes,
I thought Junior is in New York.
I think he is now a Florida resident. I think he lives in Jupiter.
Yeah, he moved.
He
moved to Jupiter. Yep.
Okay.
And who wants to move to a high tax state? I mean, who wants to pay New York State or New Jersey state income taxes when Florida has no income tax?
But do you see where I'm coming from? I mean, it would be a life insurance for Donald Trump, right? If his son would also become run in the for nomination, then if they axe him, his son would probably become the hero of the Republicans and take over. So they can't really stop a Trump from coming into the White House, and it may deter them from trying to take any action against Donald Trump.
It's a novel idea, but a Trump ticket poses a number of other issues. I mean, look, I do think he has to choose someone who is committed to his agenda, who is not part of the wing of the party that he has to defeat in order to be nominated. He has to pick somebody who can inspire and who can do the job. We don't know who that person is yet. Many people thought, myself included, that person might be Carrie Lake, but she most likely needed the perch of the Arizona governorship and 2 years under her belt as governor, some public record to be a strong vice presidential candidate. Just in terms of raw talent, she is the most talented candidate I've seen since Ronald Reagan, who was extraordinarily talented as a candidate. Unfortunately, while they have filed a very, very compelling and detailed lawsuit, I don't know that she will win that lawsuit.
Yeah.
I pray that she does, but I just don't know.
Well, let's talk about the deep state candidate, Mike Pompeo, for a second. He will obviously get the support from the CIA, the military-industrial complex, their vast media assets that the deep state controls are all going to blow the horn.
I think we need to choose Alex as vice president. I'd vote for him. Trump Alex, that's the ideal candidacy.
Oh, well, I'm not old enough.
Yeah. But is that something you're concerned about, that Pompeo is just coming in there and getting all these deep state assets to assist him?
There's a terrific piece in Yahoo that details how Mike Pompeo, a CIA director, who I think most people know, initially said that Julian Assange was a foreign state actor. In other words, a
hostile non-state intelligence agency,
right? Which I don't think there's any
journalist.
Which I don't think there's any proof of. In fact, I don't think it's true, and therefore he laid the whole predicate for the Russian collusion hoax. He talks a great game. In other words, he knows how to sound like an America First candidate. He also recognizes the former president's great susceptibility to flattery. But I also think that he lacks the skills and the charisma and the geographical positioning to be a strong candidate. I don't see. Every poll has him in single digits. He's lost a lot of weight. He looked healthier before he lost weight.
Well,
I think.
he had an operation.
Well, I think any person who is essentially a Fed has disqualified themselves from being a candidate for office. I mean, that's essentially what Pompeo is.
I mean, if Trump needs a nickname, like he gives everyone a nickname he's running against, Deep State Mike would be my recommendation.
I think that he's going to have a very hard time launching a viable candidacy.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope
It's
that
very
Trump
entertaining, but
Trump
I
will not
agree
end up
it'd
with
be a
him
total
as.
failure.
Let's just hope that Trump will not end up with him as vice president, because then we'll have a LBJ situation all over again.
I think it is unlikely because I can't see any crucial constituency that Mike Pompeo would bring the ticket.
Yeah.
Except the FBI. He'd probably get 100% of the
Fence.
FBI and the CIA vote, the deep state.
So who do you think is going to be Trump's biggest challenger for the Republican nomination?
Well, I think that's kind of self-evident. Governor DeSantis has got a large, important base. You can't get to 270 electoral votes without Florida. He has certainly now demonstrated his ability to raise the necessary money to launch a candidacy. I've been pretty vocal. I've written extensively about the fact that that Trump is solely responsible for the rise of DeSantis. DeSantis was a relatively unknown backbench congressman whose gubernatorial candidacy was in single digits, who's having fundraising issues. The Republican establishment in Florida had settled on the state agriculture commissioner, who had the endorsement of all 67 Republican county chairmen, every single elected Republican in the majority in both houses of the state legislature, and I think every member of the Republican congressional delegation, with the exception of Matt Gaetz. DeSantis's rise is completely attributable to a tweeted endorsement from Donald Trump, and his campaign literally took off like a rocket. Then in the general election, DeSantis was not a strong candidate because as a congressman, he was more familiar with federal issues. He was not as familiar with state issues. He was essentially learning on the run. Trump appeared in Florida twice in the final 2 weeks to help drag DeSantis across the finish line. So I see the fact that he seems poised to challenge Trump as a personal act of betrayal, as an act of treachery, but this is politics. As I think Harry Truman said, if you want loyalty, get a dog.
Yeah.
And DeSantis will be formidable. Where DeSantis stands on the war in Ukraine will be interesting. Whether, given the great base of his donors, he is prepared to be as tough on China as Trump was as president remains to be seen. Today, I think he clearly took steps to separate himself from the president regarding the safety and the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccinations. My instinct tells me that is a good political move. I haven't, on the other hand, seen any polling or any actual data on it, so it would be speculation. But clearly, he is moving in that direction. I think now, but there's another entire question here. First of all, I'm going to take the same position as Alex Bruceovitz. I am not turning my back on Trump. Trump changed the party. We went from the party of the wealthy elite to being the working class party. We went to being the party of economic prosperity. And Trump, I think, allowed us to reach certain voters that John McCain and Mitt Romney could not reach. It's why he won. So I'm a Trump supporter, and I'm not going to change my view. That said, I still think Trump has a hard lock on at least 40% of the primary vote, could be 45. And in a split field, I think he'd be in very good shape. And how DeSantis wears as a candidate is yet to be seen. Within the context of Florida, he does very well when he controls the microphone. But reporters here in Florida will tell you that he never subjects himself to hostile or even neutral questioning, that he limits himself to softball questioning. If you watched that debate, I thought with his opponent, who had a weak hand to begin with, I thought the governor's performance was adequate, but he never smiled. Doesn't seem to have any warmth or any sense of humor.
Trump certainly has the entertainment factor going for him, and
it'll be interesting to see, purely for entertainment value, who coalesces the anti-Trump vote the most, because we know folks like Liz Cheney and Mike Pence are definitely going to get into the race, but I don't know how who among the two is actually going to coalesce the major anti-Trump vote. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Roger. Who do you think is going to be the most effective anti-Trump candidate in this race?
See, I don't think an anti-Trump candidate can be nominated, which is why Governor DeSantis has positioned himself as essentially, although I'm not sure this is necessarily accurate, but positioned himself as Trump without the chaos, Trump without the drama, a younger Trump. That based on his congressional record, that we don't know that that's necessarily true. The last 2 years of his governorship, particularly on the cancel culture issues, is taking on Disney, his position on the mask mandates, his following through on his pledge to send illegal immigrants, to out of state to Martha's Vineyard. Those have been very successful, have raised his profile, and have appealed to MAGA Republicans. It would be a death wish to run as an establishment Republican. It would be a death wish to run as an out-and-out neocon. That's not a majority in the party.
It would definitely be lucrative in terms of money, in terms of the MSNBC slots that'll come afterwards. So there's definitely going to be folks that are going to push it. But it'd be interesting to see how far they go.
But that neocon money is already lined up with Governor DeSantis. The globalist money is already there. You can see the donors who I keep reading about. Trump lost this billionaire donor, and then I checked. The only Trump entity that this guy, Ken Griffin, ever gave to was the inauguration. He never gave Trump money prior to his election. So in many cases, those in the donor class who are now supporting the governor, who are being depicted as leaving Trump, were never actually with Trump until he was the nominee or until after he was president.
Do you think that mainstream coverage affects Republican candidates at all? Like if Trump is more hated than DeSantis, for example,
by how do you think the party's going to interpret those obviously losing anti-Trump votes? I know you definitely have a great pulse on social media.
So, guys, I have 2 or 3 more questions for Roger, and then what we're going to do, we're going to open the floor up, and we can have a totally open discussion.
And if not Ian, potentially Alex. Alex is definitely involved in the America First movement. I know he's knows a lot.
All right. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I just have 2, 3 more questions for Roger, and then I want to open it up for everyone. What makes you think, Roger, that Trump is not going to make the same mistakes he made when he became president? Let me just elaborate. So poor appointments of,
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have them right now. But Roger, what you're saying is very, it's definitely interesting.
Okay. I don't think he can hear me, so I've muted everyone. I'll just continue with the question. And then, Roger, when you answer, just unmute yourself because I've just muted everybody. I think he can't hear me. So what makes you think that Trump will not make the same mistakes he made after he became president? And I want to elaborate on that. He made some poor appointments that backstabbed him. Unelected deep state officials stopped him at every turn without consequence. His constant narcissistic tendencies, which I think became quite counterproductive. His inability to execute on his promise to drain the swamp. And quite frankly, for me personally, the unacceptable behavior towards Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, especially WikiLeaks, which helped him, so much by exposing Hillary Clinton's corruption. To me personally, that was where I felt, Trump is a terrible president for not having helped him. So, what are your views on that? And please unmute in case you're still muted. Roger, on the bottom left, you have the microphone, and if you press it, it should unmute you.
There we go.
There you
go. Finally. Look, I have to hope that the experience of the 4 years in the White House has opened his eyes. He clearly, for example, learned a hard lesson about Bill Barr. I never understood why he thought Barr, who had been Bush's attorney general, would have been a good choice given his background, his service in the Central Intelligence Agency, for example. I have to hope that he now recognizes what he didn't recognize, having not come through politics. When he first got to Washington, he believed there were two teams, the Republicans and the Democrats. And the Republicans were on his side, the Democrats were the opposition. And therefore, and he thought all Republicans, as they had under Reagan, by the way, for example, who was also an outsider, would all be pulling in the same direction. I don't think he realized that the real divide in Washington was not between Republicans and Democrats, but between establishment insiders and an outsider, and that his mere presence and his policies, for example, that he would cancel the Iranian arms deal, or that he would pull us out of the Paris Climate Accords, just to name two examples, would fly in the face of the two-party duopoly had already decided to do these things. So we have to hope that if he is elected again, I think there's a reasonable probability of that. I did a radio show today in Nevada. It was a beating. I mean, this guy was came on much stronger than I thought. But this idea that Trump is imploding, that he has, the zero, that none of that's true. I think there is a path for him to both the nomination and to reelection because the Democrats did not take the Senate and only narrowly took the House. It does not appear to me like there's going to be a reverse in our current economic policies. Our economy could look like the American economy in 1933 by the time we get to the 2024 election.
And I think that is the biggest thing that Trump will have going for him, because the economic outlook is terrible. Inflation is only going to go up. The cost of living crisis, everything gets more expensive, and we're still expecting, according to a lot of wise economists, a major crash in the markets that has been prevented so far, but only with measures of money printing and quantitative easing. So Trump may find himself in the election year in a situation of economic disaster, which would probably give him the best chance to win the election. But then, what voters may not understand is it doesn't matter who they elect in the next presidential election. No one can fix the problems because they're so deep and impossible to cure. My last question to you, and then I will open up the floor. You have a lot of insider knowledge. You are very well connected in and around Trump. Who do you think was behind the plot to assassinate Julian Assange? Was it Trump or Pompeo? Like, where did this come from?
I think it comes out of the Central Intelligence Agency. I think it is most likely the brainchild of John Brennan. I think it is obviously moved forward if you believe that Yahoo piece promulgated and put forward by Mike Pompeo. I've never had the opportunity to discuss Assange or WikiLeaks with Donald Trump on any occasion. I know some people may find that impossible to believe, but it is the truth. And there was never any evidence to the contrary. But I think it comes out of the intelligence agencies. And Assange's sin is he exposes the massive corruption of the system. I mean, look, a lot of liberals thought Julian Assange was terrific when it was the Bush administration. He was embarrassing. It was only when he began exposing the corruption of the Clintons that he became, a villain.
From that, I hear you're not opposed to him gaining his freedom.
I wrote several op-eds advocating a pardon for him 4 years ago.
Fantastic.
I think that he should be released. He's a journalist. And if I were a journalist, I would look at his treatment with great trepidation, because if it can happen to him, then it can happen to a reporter for the New York Times. He is a journalist. There's never been any proof that he is a Russian agent. The intelligence agencies can repeat that over and over again, but I've still seen no proof of it, and I don't believe it's true.
Yeah. Last thing, you once told me many years ago when we were chatting over Twitter DM that you think the US case against me is a deep state case. Can you elaborate on that?
I'm going to take a dive here because, in all honesty, I don't remember the case against you, and I don't remember what it was they were attempting to charge you with. I have viewed you as a truth teller. I have followed you, although not on Twitter for obvious reasons. But I honestly don't recall.
Yeah, that's okay. It was a long time ago. All right, but then let's open this up for everyone. We're going to move speakers up. People, raise your hands if you have questions for Roger Stone, and let's keep this thing flowing.
Hey, Roger, Grant Cardone. Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Great room, Kim. Good on putting this together. You made a comment, Roger, that the raising money is now more important than winning elections. Can you go deeper on that?
Well, I think that the Republican National Committee in its fundraising apparatus has been very, very, very lucrative for certain selected consultants, and I think that sadly that they care more about making money than they do about actually winning elections, and that's. But we don't know because we've never seen an audit, and we don't know how the party's money is being sent, and we don't know what the fee structure is. I do know if you're a Republican candidate for Congress and you don't use WinRed, a specific company, to do your payment processing, and you don't use WinRed, a specific company to acquire voter data from, that you get no financial assistance from the party. So I'm in favor of full disclosure, but the Republican National Committee has been very, very, very lucrative to a small set of consultants.
What percentage of the dollars raised, if you were going to guess, not that you know, do you think are just completely wasted with consultant agreements and theft?
Well, you have both hard money and soft money. Thus, the hard money is much easier to trace because it's reportable. The parties have rules, however, that allow parties to do things in terms of expenditures that other political committees are not allowed to do. I have no idea other than to say that, I think that in the 2020 cycle, consultants walked out of the Republican National Committee with far more than $50 million worth of fees.
Wow. And then the next question is, how much do you think COVID had to do with the destruction of Trump not being reelected?
It was clearly a major factor because if for no other reason, it stifled his signature political strategy of the rallies. The rallies were a way to transcend, mainstream media coverage of the campaign. If the rally hit any given state, it dominated state and local coverage in a way that couldn't be stopped. But as the COVID-19 pandemic shut the ability to have these rallies down, you can trace it to the polling, is when Trump begins to lose altitude. It is only when he breaks out of that construct, begins holding the rallies again, that he begins gaining both nationally and in the swing states.
So my question is, I'm just wondering, how much do you think of an impact it has when, in terms of liberal or like mainstream media coverage of and how much they hate or dislike a candidate that's a Republican candidate? So say, they dislike Trump over DeSantis. Does that, in your opinion, have any impact on an election, or does not matter at all in terms of the elections?
I think that there is greater skepticism about big media than there has ever been before. I think 2016 was the first time in our country where you had a disaffected majority of Americans who distrusted all institutions, including Republicans, Democrats, Congress, but more particularly the media. it would be unrealistic to say that the drumbeat of a media monopoly that is particularly empowered through internet censorship has no impact on the voters. It does. There's no question that it does. On the other hand, there's a growing number of people, there's a substantial number of people, and a growing number of people who can tune it out, who realize, well, if it's reported by CNN, it is most likely not true.
And would you say it had a bigger impact in like a significant impact on the past, even though it wasn't like necessarily a conservative media source? Are they more like, do they still look like a conservative voter base still looks to non-conservative media sources for information, or is it like Fox is their main source?
2016 is your best example, where Trump essentially is able to use the internet as the principal platform from which to counterpunch the usual suspects in the mainstream legacy media that are against his candidacy. In 2020, he's less effective in his ability to do that because so many of us, so many people in this call are censored, and so many conservative media outlets are censored or shadow banned. And therefore, Fox, these are the idea that Fox elected Trump is inaccurate in 2016. In fact, Fox tried to inflate several other candidates until they figured out that when they covered when they covered Trump, their ratings soared. When their ratings soared, they were able to charge more for advertising. Therefore, the decision to support Trump became a very lucrative economic decision, as well as a political decision. But Trump drove that coverage by being interesting, by being provocative, by being freewheeling, by being himself. I still think that is probably his greatest asset going into 2024. So, in a way, his greatest asset is also his greatest vulnerability. He's completely unpredictable. You can't say what he's going to do. He is, trust me, I've known him 43 years. He is completely uncontrollable. He is his own man. He will do things his way. He's not scripted. He's not handled. He's not programmed. It's just not. He's not a politician. He's a political figure. There's a huge difference, and it is still true that many voters on the right still look to Fox as their major news source. But you have also seen, particularly in this most recent cycle, that there is a very significant move to conservative net-based news sources beyond Fox. Fox is still dominant, but they are not the only asset in town.
Roger, if possible, I have two questions. The first is, recently this week, Rudy Giuliani appeared on Newsmax, and he disclosed that he provided evidence regarding the Biden family's influence peddling operation to Mike Pompeo, former CIA director, Trump's Secretary of State, who, recently was in the news because he considered an assassination plot against Julian Assange, and also to Bill Barr in 2019 or 2020 before the Ukraine impeachment. So I'm just curious what your thoughts were in regards to these revelations, and particularly in regards to Bill Barr, Pompeo, and Sean Hannity of Fox not pursuing this evidence of corruption and not making it known public.
This is the first time I have heard about this, so I didn't have the opportunity to read it or see it. I know Rudy Giuliani, and I know him to be a person of integrity who does not make charges lightly. But beyond that, I couldn't say. I would be surprised in the case of Hannity. The other two, that doesn't really surprise me. I think both Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo they're both neocons. They're both part of the permanent political establishment. Look at their histories. And that does not surprise me whatsoever.
My second question was, it was recently reported today that Gary Gensler, who has connections to FTX and is a chair of the SEC and was also the CFO for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, hid from his public schedule meetings with George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and other individuals. And I was just curious, through your interactions with the political community, what your take is on Gary Gensler and these connections.
It seems to me there's a couple different pieces up at stonezone.com, which is my website. If you're not subscribing there, you should. Stonezone.com. It's free. We would welcome you to do so. There's a couple different pieces there about the FTX scandal and Gensler's knowledge of some of these players and interaction with some of them. I wouldn't find anything you say at all surprising. Not sure.
Right.
Just yes, we're back.
Everyone is signing up to your website right now, so they're quiet. All right. So
I just got a text in which it is in which Laura Loomer requests to speak.
Okay. Who do I look for? What's their Twitter name?
Probably Laura Loomer.
I don't see it. I might have to invite her manually, maybe.
I'll DM you both. I was on a space with her yesterday.
Yeah, just Ian, if you can find her, feel free to move her up,
because we follow each other. So I should be able to invite her manually. I had to do the same thing with Chase to add him. He's great, by the way. I'm pretty sure he's spoken to Roger before, so I wanted to add him.
So while you are finding that person, Stephen has the hand raised. So go ahead, Stephen.
Hey, thank you, Kim. Appreciate you put on the space. And Roger, absolute pleasure speaking to you. My question for you is, what are, in your opinion, what are the main challenges that Trump faces from a strategic standpoint on the campaign trail will face in 2023 and 24 that he didn't face previously? And what advice would you give to him going into this new era?
First of all, Stephen, let me compliment you on that hat. That is an excellent hat that you're wearing there in your avatar.
Thank you. Yeah, I collect vintage clothing. Thank you, and I know you're certainly a man of good taste. So I really appreciate that.
I don't think I own a suit that isn't at least 30 years old, but so I guess I'm a collector of vintage clothing as well. I think that the greatest single obstacle to Trump is the Republican establishment, which, ironically, many members of which he helped in the most recent, midterm elections. I think, sadly, that many that he assisted in both primaries and in general elections are not going to return the favor. I think he has to turn that into an asset rather than a deficit. I don't think you want to be the candidate of the Republican establishment. It's very interesting. One of the national polls today that I looked at, which showed that Governor DeSantis had gained a great deal of strength, still showed that President Trump was quite strong. I think Trump's approval rating was 70. I think DeSantis's was 80. DeSantis, I would remind you, just spent $50 million on digital advertising in Florida and nationwide. And I think that is being reflected in some of these polls. But what was most interesting in the poll was the underwater rating of Mitch McConnell. The Republican establishment leadership in both houses is not popular with the American people, and it is not popular with grassroots Republicans. Trump clearly, some of the media outlets that I think treated his candidacy more favorably, speaking specifically of, say, the Wall Street Journal and Fox, will be opposed to him this time. I think he has to revert to being the 2015, 2016 era Trump, the outsider. I don't think he can expect, the support from those quarters again. Clearly, you have seen between the Department of Justice onslaught against him and the very broad media onslaught against him, there is a palpable fear of his returning to the White House. That said, I still honestly believe that he has an unshakable lock on somewhere around 45% of the Republican primary vote. And there's another 20% there that have supported him in the past, who are not necessarily adverse to him, that he has to win back.
Gotcha. That's a great answer. I know there was some criticism from some of his core base that perhaps his announcement speech was a bit muted, bit dull. Do you have any thoughts on that? How did you think he did regarding his announcement speech?
I was looking for two things, and I heard both of them, and I think they are two of the keys to his comeback. One is a pledge to fight for term limits. The other one is to fight for a pledge for a lifetime ban on lobbying by anyone who served in either the executive or the legislative branch of government. These are very, very popular ideas, not only among Republicans, but among all voters. And they always get mentioned at the beginning of the campaign, and then they always seem to get lost and they never get returned to. Those two issues have very real power. I was happy because the speech was positive, that he didn't spend it attacking other Republicans. There will be a time for that, I assure you, but I don't think that time is now. And I do think he did an effective job of juxtaposing his record on the economy, his record on energy independence, his record on foreign policy with the disastrous results of the current administration. But the two most important things he talked about, which much of the media lost, were term limits and this permanent lobbying ban. Those need to become major, major themes of his campaign. They drive the American political establishment completely insane, but the American people are overwhelmingly for them.
Fantastic. And one last little question here. It seems to me that the border crisis obviously has been spinning wildly out of control since Trump hasn't been in the White House, and the GOP has done very little to nothing to even signal that they're trying to do anything to get it under control. That has been my observation. I still think immigration should be a very hot issue for all voters going into 2024. What do you think about that? Do you think Trump should run on completing the wall and even beefing up border security even more? Do you think that's going to be as hot of an issue going into the next race?
Well, it already is, because the way it translates is as a crime issue and a drug epidemic issue. We have a crime epidemic and a drug epidemic in this country. It is caused by illegal immigration. And if you seal the wall, if you seal our border, then you would see a drop in the flow of fentanyl into the country, and you'd also see a resultant drop in crime. So it is already front and center as an issue, and it has to be a signature issue in the next campaign.
Fantastic.
Roger,
Thank you, Roger.
I had one question because you see this dichotomy now that you see corporate legacy media, establishment Republicans and rhinos pushing in regards to the DeSantis Trump split. And I'm curious. I mean, we know Ken Griffin of Citadel and Paul Tudor Jones of Robinhood, who were responsible for the AMC GameStop shorts, are backing him. And you saw a lot of establishment rhino money flow into DeSantis in a non-competitive race, basically helping to build him a coffer for a presidential run. I'm just curious what your take is. We've seen the media immediately try to smear and blame Trump for the midterms instead of focusing attention on the three leaders of the party, McConnell, McCarthy, and McDaniels. And I'm curious if there's any other bad faith actors you see there making a concerted effort to kill, right-wing populism and go with Trump light.
Well, first of all,
Roger's got a lot to say about that.
why doesn't Trump get credit for the victory of J.D. Vance in Ohio? Why doesn't Trump get credit for the victory of probably his strongest supporter in the U.S. Senate, Ron Johnson, who was in a very, very difficult and competitive race and who won? Why doesn't Trump get credit for the fact that 3.7 more voters voted for Republican congressional candidates than voted for Democrats? No, I think the blame belongs among those who run the party committees and they should shoulder their share of the blame. You have hit the nail on the head. What is Ron DeSantis? Where does he stand on Ukraine? Where does he stand on China? As a governor, he hasn't had to say. In the House, he voted as a neocon. A man is known by the people who surround you. When Paul Ryan and Ken Griffin and Paul Tudor Jones, who I believe is a Democrat actually, are beating the drum for your candidacy, that gives me great pause. I can't see in that huge catch of money that Governor DeSantis has raised, where are the big America First donors? I don't see them. What I see are the same people who supported Jeb Bush. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly say that Ron DeSantis is an ally to America First. And to Roger's credit, hey Roger, how's it going? It's Laura
Well,
here.
Loomer, we got you in here. How about that?
Yeah, it's good to be back on Twitter with you.
But
I would say that Roger was the first person to call the fact that Ron DeSantis is planning on primarying Donald Trump. Roger's been talking about this on Telegram because, Roger's been banned from Twitter, for about 3 years, right? 4 years almost, Roger?
Since 2017.
Yeah, just like me. So for the last 2 years, Roger's been talking on Telegram about how Ron DeSantis has been building out his presidential team. And I'll tell you, when I was running for Congress down in Palm Beach County, there were donors in Palm Beach who told me that they had already been requested to serve on Ron DeSantis's 2024 presidential finance committee. And so you already see this now here in the state of Florida. And just like Roger said, after the 2022 midterms, and we saw that the Republicans fell short of their red wave that they were hyping up. We knew that they weren't going to have a red wave, of course, because why would they? The Republican Party did absolutely nothing to address voter fraud. They did absolutely nothing to address big tech social media censorship, and it was a repeat of 2020. Ron DeSantis, none of the candidates who he endorsed won their elections, and he was counter signaling Donald Trump the entire time. And then what did the GOP do? They blamed Donald Trump for all of the midterm losses. And then they had the audacity, and Rupert Murdoch and all of his publications had the audacity to give Ron DeSantis credit for all of the GOP victories. And so, I think that Ron DeSantis is an enemy to America First. I think you would agree too, Roger, right? His endorsement of Joe O'Dea, who said that he wanted to see all of the January 6 prisoners locked up and prosecuted, and that he would vote against Donald Trump in 2024. Do you think that Ron DeSantis is an enemy to America First?
I don't think he's an America First Republican. I think he is a neocon. He's done some things in the last 2 years of his governorship that I approve of, but now it appears, for example, that there's a deal afoot to restore Disney's special tax status. Let's wait, as Donald Trump would say, let's see what happens. This was a stunning news today that Governor DeSantis is asking the state Supreme Court to impanel a grand jury to investigate whether Floridians were misled about the effectiveness and the safety of the COVID-19 vaccination. That would be a giant break with Big Pharma. I predicted that this would not happen, to be honest with you. And therefore, I find it surprising. And I think it's a significant development. But Laura is right. I think from the instant that he was elected governor, Ron DeSantis began planning a campaign for president. When I said this after the debates, anybody who watched the debate with Charlie Crist, where Crist, I think, he is a very supple fellow. You go from being, the most hard right, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment governor in the country to being for abortion on demand and gun confiscation. You go from saying Ronald Reagan's your favorite president to saying Barack Obama is your favorite president. That takes a pretty slippery politician. And he went into this debate with an extraordinarily weak hand. It's very difficult to be who he is. But even in that debate, he put the question to Ron DeSantis 3 separate times. Will you pledge, if reelected, to fulfill all 4 years of your term, or are you going to run off and run for president? And all the first time, Governor DeSantis, who had to be expecting this question, froze like a deer in the headlights. For a full 20 seconds, he just seems stunned. And then he gives a non-answer. He dodged the question 3 times. So those on social media who immediately attacked me for saying, DeSantis isn't running for president, he's not challenging Trump, why are you trying to divide us? You're making all this up. No, folks, he's running for president. Now, it's a free country. That's his prerogative. He is the flavor of the month way too early, in my opinion, to be, you might even argue that he's the front runner today, 2 years in advance. There's a spate of polls today across the country that show that he is pulled ahead of Trump. Although when you read the small print, you find that only when you add Republicans and independents together is he ahead. And when you get back down to those who say they're going to vote in the Republican primaries, Trump still leads. So there's a national media campaign to propel him into the position of front runner way, way, way too early, in my opinion.
Well, and obviously, you're not afraid to talk about these things, and so I wanna kind of push the envelope. And you and I have had private conversations about this, but I do think it's necessary to talk about this. And now that I'm back on Twitter, I think more conservatives need to be asking this question. And it's why was Governor Ron DeSantis so quiet and so fickle in his response to the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago? And do you think that Ron DeSantis had advanced knowledge about the raid on Mar-a-Lago? Because there was a lot of discussion. I know you and I had conversations about it, Roger, about whether or not Ron DeSantis could have actually prevented the raid at Mar-a-Lago. Governors could actually call in the National Guard and the state police. And you'll notice that Governor Ron DeSantis took hours to issue a statement, and he didn't even mention Donald Trump's name. He didn't mention Mar-a-Lago in his statement. He used the abbreviation MAL. And I think that it was a very weak and kind of embarrassing response from Governor Ron DeSantis that showed his contempt for Donald Trump. And that, for me, was one of the first signs that he was planning on stabbing Donald Trump in the back, along with his intentional, and I will say intentional, sabotage of the Florida big tech social media censorship bill, which was designed to fail. Because that's another thing, is we're talking about the Twitter files in this Twitter space here. It's important for people to know that Governor DeSantis made a promise that he was going to ban social media censorship in Florida, and yet he allowed for big tech to get away with committing illegal election interference. So he needs to be held accountable for that. And what's going to happen when Donald Trump runs in 2024? He's already filed, right? He's a deplatformed sitting United States president, and he's a Floridian.
Hey, by the way, Roger, you will be happy to hear that on Space's dashboard, we are the #1 space on Twitter right now. So you're still relevant, even after years of absence from Twitter.
Well, that is gratifying. Laura, I don't know that a governor can stop a federal action, to be honest with you. I do remember vaguely seeing the governor's statement in the wake of the raid at Mar-a-Lago. I think we would all be unrealistic to think that Governor DeSantis and his supporters don't hope that the Trump candidacy will be weighted down, perhaps even destroyed through some kind of indictment in connection with January 6th or these documents. I don't know that there's a legitimate case against the president. The document thing is a total mystery to me, and I think everyone else. We don't know what documents we're talking about. We do know that other past presidents have held on to documents, including classified documents, and there's been no legal penalty for that. But beyond that, I would not speculate, other than to say Ron DeSantis is running for president. Where does he stand on the war in Ukraine? Is he for the $100 billion that we have sent to Ukraine, or is he against it? And given where his money's coming from, would he be as tough on the Chinese as Trump was as president, and as Trump would be in the second term? He is breaking new ground on the COVID-19 vaccination. I saw your comments in an NBC piece today, Laura, where you said it's politically expedient. That may be true, but it is also, I think, politically pretty sound.
Yeah,
Roger, I
it's
want to.
savvy. I would agree that it's savvy. Really quick, I'll let you speak. It's just I believe that it's savvy, but I think that it's calculated and strategic because if he's going to run against Donald Trump, he's going to be viewed as an ingrate. And let's be honest, Ron DeSantis is an ingrate. He owes his entire political career to Donald Trump, and the fact that he's going to try to run against the man he owes everything to shows that he is extremely ungrateful. So the
But I
only thing
don't,
that he
I
can
don't,
really attack Trump on is the vaccine, which is why he's trying to run to the right on Donald Trump on the vaccine. But that's
with
it. I'll let you.
with all due respect to my friend Laura Loomer, I don't think voters care about that. That is sadly voters. That's a political argument that he owes Trump. I don't think it has any impact with the voters. As I said, maybe before you joined us, Laura, as Harry Truman said, if you want loyalty, get a dog.
Roger, I had a question because, yes, the border is important and other stuff, but for me, the main issue in 2024, and I think a lot of people in this space, is to deal with the corruption of the law enforcement intelligence agencies in DC and to deal with the regulatory capture we have seen in both the SEC and EPA. I mean, they're revoking and not renewing nuclear licenses in Michigan, in Florida, in California. They literally just shut down 4 hydro dams that provide 70,000 households with renewable energy. I mean, they're crippling American energy, and it's not just the intelligence community. I like DeSantis. I think he's a good governor, but I do support Trump. So I just don't see DeSantis having the independent wealth or the willpower to deal with this type of rot in DC. I mean, when you look at it, other than cable news attacks, he hasn't dealt with the full brunt of the deep state. And I firmly believe that they must destroy Trump and Trumpism, and then they'll turn their attention to DeSantis. So my question to you is, DeSantis hasn't really talked about this. At least Trump has brought up Schedule F. There's whispers that he may relocate agencies, which would lead to attrition to a lot of these DC swamp creatures not moving out to red states. I mean, who do you think is better equipped and has the motivation to deal with this, bureaucratic state and these alphabet agencies that are just completely lawless?
Well, we know, for example, that the Capitol Hill Police have an appropriation and an authorization for a headquarters in Florida. That legislation was passed and signed into law. This is a legislative police force. Governor DeSantis has done nothing about this. We don't exactly know what the Capitol Hill Police have going in Florida, but this was reported in the mainstream media. They are supposedly here investigating, quote, right-wing extremism. I've never heard of such a thing. The police would normally be under the executive branch, would report to the Justice Department or to the FBI. The Capitol Hill Police reach now in both California and Florida was passed as a matter of law. Governor DeSantis has done nothing about that. He went to Harvard and he went to Yale. Those are not pluses, in my opinion. He is, but again, his candidacy looks very strong on paper. There's more to it than kind of these tightly rehearsed lines that you saw in the debate. How he will wear over time, and his unwillingness to mix with voters. He's either an introvert in an extrovert's business, as Nixon was, by the way, who had this is why Nixon is so uncomfortable in his own skin, why he has trouble with small talk, why he is physically awkward. He had to force himself. It's not that he was arrogant, it's that he was painfully shy and just uncomfortable with people. DeSantis's campaign style was not to mix with people. He would, in his pit stop rallies, he would come in from the back. He would have a tremendous ovation. He would give prepared remarks. He would pose for 1 or 2 selfies, and then he would leave the same way he came in. That kind of those rituals of American politics seem to be nothing that he has time or interest in. And running for president, particularly in the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, I'm not sure Trump has to do this because he's already done it. Also because the set piece rally is kind of his thing. But DeSantis is going to find that if he runs for president, he's going to get greater scrutiny than he's ever gotten. He's gotten no scrutiny whatsoever from the Florida press. And it remains to be seen whether he has the temperament and the people skills and the charisma to be a strong presidential candidate. It's more than the ability to stick to a given line on a given issue.
Is there any
Hey,
chance he would go along to get the similar golden parachutes post office that were given to Clinton and Obama for speaking engagements? I mean, that's another concern I have. He doesn't have independent wealth. He's not talking about corruption in the CIA, the FBI, or these bureaus or agencies. So I'm curious. I mean, from your interactions, do you think, he might do some good things, but not deal with the actual issues in DC regarding the agencies?
I've not seen him speak out on this issue. I think he is an establishment Republican. I don't know that he has the fortitude to take on those institutions. Look, I'd like to be wrong, but we just don't know. It is clear that you have a budding scandal here in Jacksonville in this defense contractor who is alleged committed suicide several days ago, was a major donor to DeSantis, was a major donor to the Republican Party. For some reason, he's being investigated by the Jacksonville, or I guess it's the Duval County Sheriff's Office or the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. But he had a pass card, a fast card, an access card, an all access card for the Sheriff's Department that he used right up until the middle of November. He rented his apartment to Ron DeSantis when he was a congressman. It is reported that when DeSantis was elected governor and moved to the governor's mansion, that this gentleman rented DeSantis's home. This is a story and still in development. The governor put out a warm statement about his death, but it is reported that he was under investigation for sexual misconduct. We don't know what that means. You can read about it in Politico. You can read about it in the UK Daily Mail. Everything I've just said.
Sexual misconduct with a minor, I'll say. So I think that's an important part to mention. Sexual misconduct with a minor.
I've not seen that, so I don't know that I don't know that. But again, 2 years is a lifetime in politics. We are now handicapping a race that is 2 years away. I think the president got into this campaign very early. Sustaining a presidential campaign for 2 years for anyone, challenger or former president, is going to be extremely difficult. You've got to keep people interesting. What Nixon once said to me is the only thing worse in politics than being wrong is being boring. If you bore the voters, they will go looking elsewhere for someone who isn't boring, and therefore you have a tremendous pressure on you to remain interesting, to show motion. Politics is motion, and the perception that your campaign is moving, gaining steam, gathering support. That perception is very, very important. You can't just announce your candidacy and then do nothing. Now, we do have a holiday in here, which buys Trump some time, but he's going to have to move things into high gear in January because he's chosen to get in very early. This rhythm is not necessarily up to him.
Hey, Roger, how likely is it that the Democrats are going to manage to prevent Trump from running again by legal means? Let's say the Gen 6 investigation of the House gets submitted to the DOJ with a recommendation to indict him. How big do you think the risk is that Trump will be eliminated by, DOJ actions?
I have seen a legal theory that violation of a post-Civil War law related to the 14th Amendment would prohibit him from running for president. Other than that, being charged with any other crime, I think doesn't prohibit you from being a candidate for president. I'm just not knowledgeable enough regarding the documents case. Now that his Twitter page is unfrozen, you can see that he specifically on January 6th opposes violence and lawlessness, calls on people to stand down, not to break the law. I've saw a one-sided proceeding in Washington, the January 6 hearings. I can tell you firsthand the two allegations to me by a woman named Cassidy Hutchinson are completely false. The assertion that President Trump told Mark Meadows to call me and to call General Flynn on the afternoon or evening of January 5th to find out what was going to happen on January 6th is categorically and completely false. I've never spoken to Mark Meadows on the phone. I've never communicated with him directly. I met him once in a green room at Fox back when he was a congressman. That is the only time I've had any interaction with him at all. So she perjured herself. That is false. She goes on to say that there was a war room in the Willard Hotel. Well, if that's true, I don't know it. I was not in any war room, and I have no knowledge of any war room. To their credit, the Washington Post has accurately reported that. But that he, Meadows, was supposed to go to a meeting in this war room with others, and that he, instead of going, he later called Flynn and I for a briefing. Well, there is no such war room. There is no such meeting. There is no such briefing. And I know nothing about any of this. But it was all presented to the American people on national television as if it was factual. It is not factual. I still have not seen a January 6th. I'm not aware of any January 6th related crime by Donald Trump.
I watched the clips from a documentary maker that were played at the January 6th hearings in Congress. They seem to suggest that the January 6th events were your idea. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, categorically false. First of all, I don't think they say that at all. One of those videos they use a manipulated soundtrack. No place do you see me saying the words attributed to me. CNN showed an entirely different version of that video. I think it is and I've said that it is a fraud. In the other one, yes, I do say that if the election is in dispute, if it is up in the air, Trump should declare victory. I did not say if Trump loses, he should declare victory. That's not what I said. That is the same advice that James A. Baker III gave to George W. Bush in 1980, I guess it would have been in 2000, and he was hailed as a genius. No, if you look at those videos, they're clearly manipulated. You can't see my mouth moving. You can't see me saying those things. And one of them, the camera's bouncing around wildly. Nice try. There's just nothing there. Any claim that I knew in advance about, participated in, or condoned any illegal action on January 6th at the Capitol or any other date or any other place is just categorically false. There is no evidence to the contrary because it is false.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, Roger, what do you say to those that say that Trump will activate the Democratic Party more than any other candidate?
Well, he certainly is polarizing. There is no doubt about that. But anybody who thinks that if the party nominates a different candidate means that the election machinery is going to operate differently in, say, Pennsylvania or Michigan, is really being naive. If in fact Laura Loomer and I are wrong, if in fact Ron DeSantis is a MAGA Republican, which I think is questionable, well, then the same media government combine will turn on him with the same vengeance that they have turned on Donald Trump. Is he polarizing? Yes. He was polarizing the first time he was elected. Can he win again? Yes, under the right circumstances, he can win again. But the state of the economy, once again, is going to be a very key factor.
I think
Hey, Roger.
that's the number one factor is the economy and where it is heading. I think that is probably the biggest thing Trump has going for him. One thing that I wondered in the Twitter files, there was so much information about, what went on with the censorship on Twitter, that it was, politically one-sided, that you had operatives of the FBI and, assets of the deep state in Twitter basically working hand in hand to prevent, the voices that were primarily on the right. Yet in the midterm election, with that benefit, the Democrats didn't really achieve more than a tie. Now that this is unchained, and now that free speech has returned to Twitter, I mean, isn't that a game changer?
What's going to happen over at Facebook? Facebook is still the big kahuna here in terms of
No, I mean
social
totally.
media.
Twitter is the tip of the iceberg, right? You have Facebook, you have Google.
Google is also
Absolutely.
obviously.
I mean, they're all working in tune with the Democrats against Trump or Republicans in general. But this has now opened the floodgates, right? I mean, people understand more and more what's going on, and if they can't get free speech on Facebook, and if they can't get it on Google and they get manipulated there, they now have an alternative, which they didn't have before. And Elon has already announced that user numbers are shooting through the roof. More people sign up than ever before. So, this could be a game changer, no?
It very definitely is. This is why my hat is off to Elon Musk, who proves to be everything he said he was. Not a partisan, neither right nor left, just committed to open communication and free speech. I am very gratified to be back here. I'm also surprised, but I do think it has, as you point out, changed everything. Google is the number one bad actor in the universe here. If you donated, for example, to my legal defense fund, and I had to go out and raise all the money for my legal defense, and you have a Gmail account, and I try to contact you and you respond to me, even if you have listed me as white male, your response to me is going to go to my spam file no matter what. No matter what, for example. So, yeah, there's a major manipulation by Google and Facebook right off the bat. If a Republican candidate is not allowed to use the advertising technology of Facebook because they're banned, but the Democratic candidate is, well, that's a corporate contribution. That's a case that the National Republican Congressional Committee should have taken to court 2 cycles ago, but they have not done so. The technology on Facebook, in terms of ability to target certain subsets of people within a certain geography, is really quite remarkable and quite effective, but in many cases it's not available to Republicans. That is something that has to be addressed. But yes, I think Elon Musk has busted this whole thing wide open, and it is a new day.
Well, the next thing that's going to happen, of course, is that this is going to be investigated in the House, right? I mean, the all the data that is now available about this collusion, there's no question that they're going to subpoena the heads of Google and Facebook and everybody to come and answer questions if they have similar manipulation and censorship tools.
Well, this went from being a political scandal where a privately owned company colluded with a major national party and Democratic presidential candidate to manipulate information in the marketplace, to a much bigger scandal when the FBI was identified as being in on the entire thing. This takes us beyond the scope of Watergate. In Watergate, there's no abuse of power by any government agency. In fact, what happens is a bunch of misguided private citizens seek to break into the Watergate. The FBI didn't break into the Watergate. The CIA didn't break into the Watergate, although we now know, based on declassified documents released several months ago, they certainly knew it was going to happen in advance. They certainly monitored it closely, and the Watergate special prosecutors knew that, but that information was kept out of the Senate Watergate Final Committee and was never reported on by the Washington Post. How about that? So you now have taken this to another realm with Elon Musk's latest revelations about the FBI going to Twitter in advance, saying, "Oh, there's going to be a data dump regarding Hunter Biden is most likely coming from the Russians. It's disinformation." Now this is an abuse of power scandal. Will the House Republicans investigate this? Will they subpoena all these people? I don't really know the answer to that. They should. We want them to, but it remains to be seen. It really does.
Well, Roger, for those who don't know, and Kim, to answer your question, uh, and it goes along with what Roger was saying about last election season and all of this big tech election interference. Roger was actually an advisor to me on my congressional campaign. And when I ran for Congress, I was the first deplatformed candidate in United States history, which means we were the first campaign denied access to social media. And so today, my lawyers and I actually filed our opposition to Twitter and Facebook and Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg's motion to dismiss my RICO case. So we filed a RICO case against these groups, as well as P&G, and then we also listed some Doe defendants within the government. Of course, that's referring to the FBI for their criminal racketeering, wire fraud, and criminal election interference, and some of their other organized crime, because that's exactly what these big tech social media companies are. And you saw Rudy Giuliani used RICO to break up the mob, and RICO's been used to break up the mafia, and that's what big tech is today. It's a mafia. So my legal team and I are trying to use RICO as a strategy to do exactly what Roger just mentioned, because we can't really rely on Congress given their record of not doing anything. Even when this was taking place during the Trump administration, Republicans had control of the House and they did nothing. All of our representatives are on the take from big tech. And then, we're lucky that we have Elon Musk, but how screwed up is it that we have to have representatives that abdicate their responsibilities to a billionaire, right? What would we do without Elon Musk? Where are these representatives who are just abdicating their responsibility to protect our constitutional right to free speech? So we have serious issues in this country.
Roger, I wanted to ask you a question regarding your specific case, if possible. Discovery is typically broad, and the government's supposed to give you exculpatory evidence. Now, it came out later in the CrowdStrike depositions that there was no evidence of exfiltration from the DNC. And then Comey also admitted, or the FBI admitted under oath, that they never actually asked for the DNC servers. They relied on CrowdStrike. I was wondering if that information was ever given to you. And just a follow-up question to that, in regards to General Flynn, later came out later that Covington, where Attorney General Holder was at, basically forced them into the plea deal, and the FBI and DOJ used hardball tactics in regards to threatening to basically imprison his son if he didn't agree to the charges. So I was just curious if that exculpatory evidence was ever provided to you, or if the DOJ and FBI tried to use these hardball tactics to force you into a plea deal that admitting to something you never did.
My lawyers asked for the CrowdStrike's report for use in my defense, and it was denied to us by the judge. We were not allowed to see it. At the time, the testimony of Sean Henry before the House Intelligence Committee, in which he admitted that the CrowdStrike's report contained no proof of an online hack of the DNC by Russian intelligence, was classified, and we did not have access to it. We specifically asked for all of Special Counsel Mueller's report regarding me. The judge ruled, and the government was opposed to our having any of it. We asked that we have all of it. The judge ruled that she would review it and decide what sections we could have. She did not give us the section that was released by court order on November 3rd of 2020, in which Mueller himself could not sugarcoat the fact that he had found, quote, no factual evidence, close quote, of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or my involvement in the phishing or publication of John Podesta's emails. This was withheld from us at trial, as was the CrowdStrike's report. Remember, the underlying predicate of the charges against me was that the DNC had been the subject of a Russian intelligence hack. And in fact, my case was tried before Judge Berman because the government argued that it was related to the case of the alleged Russian hacking of the DNC, a case that has never gone to trial, a case that has never even had discovery. But the government did promise that at my trial, they would introduce evidence against me gleaned from search warrants in that case, which of course they never did because there never was any such evidence. In the case of General Flynn, I believe everything you just said is true. I think that Flynn's lawyers fleeced him for $6 million or more, essentially bankrupted him, and worked with prosecutors to persuade him to plead guilty to a crime he did not commit. We were essentially standing trial in the same courthouse at the same time. As I said at the beginning of this, you cannot lie about Russian collusion that didn't happen. The idea that I lied under oath to violate the False Statements Act, your statement has to be material, it has to be willful. There was nothing to hide. The claim that I was an intermediary between WikiLeaks, the Russians, and the Trump campaign is categorically false. The government didn't even make that claim. They didn't make that charge. In fact, they said in the beginning that they didn't have to prove that there was any Russian collusion to prove that I lied. Well, then the lie had to be material to cover up what crime? It doesn't even make sense. But the real reason, as I have established, that I was charged was to pressure me into testifying falsely against Donald Trump. I was arrested in January. In July of that year, 2019, a proposal was made to my attorneys that if I would claim that some 29 cell phone calls between candidate Trump and myself in 2016 pertained to WikiLeaks and the Russians and so on, that they would argue for leniency in my sentencing. I'd already passed 3 polygraph tests to the contrary. It wasn't true. I declined to say that. And it's why, in the end, they attempted in their sentencing memo to send me to prison for 7 to 9 years, in many cases, giving me additional time for crimes in which I hadn't even been charged and hadn't been convicted of. The sentencing memo specifically cites my involvement in foreign interference in our election. Wasn't charged with that. There was no evidence of that. So I'm writing a book on this. It is a long, convoluted story. But remember, I was unconstitutionally gagged. And only after my conviction did we learn that the jury forewoman, who said during jury selection that she didn't know who I was, had been attacking both me and Donald Trump on both Twitter and Facebook in 2019, the year prior to her being selected as a juror, but had kept those comments in a private setting. The journalist Mike Cernovich is the person who found and reported that. My lawyers moved for a new trial on that basis, and the judge ultimately ruled that that was not evidence of bias. The fact that the jury forewoman had said on Facebook that all of Donald Trump's supporters are racists, for example, was not evidence of bias. I think that it was those outrageous actions that came to the attention of the president, and it is why I ultimately received an unconditional pardon. The claim by some that there was some corrupt bargain in which I agreed to remain silent about some unspecified wrongdoing by Donald Trump in return for a pardon is a lie, a vile lie for which there is no evidence or proof. You do have the testimony of Michael Cohen, who is trying to get a lighter sentence, and Rick Gates trying to get a lighter sentence. But they changed their testimony several times. It is entirely inaccurate and false.
Hey, Roger. Man, you've actually made me a little more hopeful about Trump tonight. So we'll see what happens. You campaigned for Nixon, Reagan, Kemp, Dole, Bush. Like, what is the dirtiest, nastiest thing you've ever seen in politics? And then I got one other question.
That's easy. It is Russiagate. It is the use of the full authority of the U.S. government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies, utilizing what they knew was fabricated evidence, the Steele dossier and the CrowdStrike's report, as the rationale to get a FISA warrant to spy on Donald Trump and his campaign, and to empower a special counsel to remove a duly elected president. That makes Watergate look like small potatoes. That is the single greatest political dirty trick in American history. And it is, I think, growingly apparent that nobody, not James Comey, not John Brennan, not Hillary Clinton, not John Podesta, not anyone involved in this process is going to be held responsible for it.
So, what do you say to somebody that has some political ambitions and thinks about that is in the private, business life, and every once in a while has inclinations to be like, "Hey, how could I do there?" What would you tell somebody?
Think hard. That was a joke.
Yeah.
Look, this is it is a very dirty business. It has changed exponentially. We have seen the weaponization of our judicial system. It's not when you have the full weight of the federal government against you. It's very rare that you will survive. I thank Jesus Christ every day for the fact that I'm alive and healthy. As some of you may or may not know, almost immediately upon my being pardoned, we learned that my wife was diagnosed with very aggressive stage 4 cancer, which I think is triggered by stress, the stress of being hounded for 2.5 years straight. And I'm happy to say, through the healing power of Christ, today she is cancer-free, and we are both healthy. Are we struggling financially? Yes. Censorship has not helped. I have not, because of censorship, I've not been able to sell my books. I've not been able to be as economically successful with my podcast, but I keep trying. And now, thanks to Elon Musk and Twitter, more people know that every day you can see me at 5 o'clock at stonezone.live every day, 5 days a week, 5 o'clock Eastern, where we talk news, politics, culture, food, style, you name it.
I think
Roger,
Charlie
where can
Kirk,
people
I
donate
think
to your legal defense fund? Because Roger works tirelessly, and I think that he's a national hero, and whatever you can donate to help him, even while his wife was suffering from cancer, Roger was working tirelessly while he was attacked by the federal government. So what's your legal defense fund website, Roger?
We still have 11 civil suits filed against my wife and I, all of them baseless, all of them meritless. This is what they call lawfare. It's designed to grind you down with legal fees and bad publicity. People can go to stonedefensefund.com, stonedefensefund.com, and contribute. You can also get your very own Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt, or your
Nice.
signed
I got to
official
get one of
president,
those.
or your official signed presidential pardon, copy of my pardon, or your very own Roger Stone, which is a white stone to which I have signed my name in fulfillment of the white stone prophecy in the Bible. You can get all of those items by going to stonezone.com and going to the shop. And God will bless you for it.
Roger, there's another remedy that you may want to join into. Charlie Kirk and a couple of others are planning to sue for having been censored on Twitter. And you just mentioned, all the damages that you have suffered because of censorship. So I think you should join in with them. I think there are a couple of other big accounts that are going to take action. And I recommended that they should go straight after the DNC and, the institutions that helped in this censorship effort at Twitter. So this could be a significant lawsuit and something that I think you would enjoy.
I will certainly ask my lawyers to look into it. Unfortunately, I have to talk to them every day. We have 11 individual civil suits in which we're defending. The good news is there were 117. 6 of them have been settled in my favor, and they will all ultimately be settled in my favor because they are all baseless. But this is what they call lawfare. This is where people bitter about my presidential pardon, bitter the fact that I'm still alive, cook up a completely baseless lawsuit against you. It's extraordinarily expensive. So there is not any given month in which the total of my legal fees and the total of my wife's uninsured medical costs and our just modest living is not greater than the amount of money that I earn through my podcast or by writing or speaking. So I ask people to go to stonezone.com and check it out, sign up and subscribe. check out the shop. There's some great products there. All my books, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, the New York Times bestseller. My first book is there. You could go to Amazon and buy it, but that copy won't be signed. Or my book, Stone's Rules, which is just kind of like Sun Tzu's Art of War, like Machiavelli's The Prince. It has a foreword by my friend Tucker Carlson. That is also available on the website. Check it out. Your support is appreciated.
Yeah, if you look up top, I've pinned Roger Stone's Substack and his website there. If you want to frequent it, you can just click on the links.
Should I just go ahead?
Sure.
Great. Hi, this is Jane Adams speaking. Thanks, Kim, for hosting this wonderful space. Mr. Stone, it's nice to meet you. Ms. Loomer, it's a pleasure. Mr. Stone, I completely agree with you on audits and donors. I think the GOP is imploding primarily because of the leadership. Ronna McDaniel's vast network of slithery consultants and rhino henchmen. So I have a quick question for you and anyone on the panel that wants to share an opinion on this, and then I'll step down. So now that transparency is a growing concern for voters, do you think the GOP will embrace that call for transparency and take accountability and basically recalibrate, or do you think they'll wait for the hype to settle down and continue business as usual? Thanks.
First of all, it is important to note that Ronna Romney McDaniel, as I like to call her, is the first Republican national chairman in the history of the party to remain in office after the loss of a presidential contest. Never in the history of the party has a national chairperson remained in office after losing the White House. And she serves essentially only because she conned Donald Trump into supporting her reelection. When he complained to her in the aftermath of the 2020 election that the National Committee was not doing enough to support the audit, for example, in Maricopa County in Arizona, or any of the efforts to examine the results of the election, she explained that she couldn't do that because party donors thought she was a lame duck and therefore they wouldn't give to the party because they didn't think that she would be there. But if he would support her for another term, she would be able to raise that money. He supported her for another term. She raised an additional $93 million, not a penny of which I believe went into any effort to examine the results of the 2020 election. The Maricopa County audit was paid for privately with funds raised by General Flynn and others. This is also true in other states where audits took place. So you're absolutely right. This is a money-making scam. That's what it is. It is not about winning elections. There's no interest or even concern about winning elections. This is about lining certain pockets. And the party needs to come to grips with this simple fact, and this is going to be kind of the last thing I say because it's been 2 hours and I'm running out of voice. And Kim, I'm very indebted to you for setting this up. It's been a great experience. To add to 270 electoral votes for any Republican candidate for president, one is going to need Arizona, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. I picked those three states because you have Republican majorities in the legislature in both houses. And therefore, those are the states where you have the greatest prospect of state election law reform. That means you have to get to 270 electoral votes without Michigan and without Pennsylvania. And I do not think you're going to get a reform of the election process in either one of those states. So Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, anybody who wants to be the Republican nominee for president needs to focus on election law reform in those three states. Every other state, you can predictably determine where they're going to go based on voter history. Ohio, interestingly enough, has become increasingly Republican. So Ohio, which eluded John McCain, Ohio, which eluded Mitt Romney, went relatively strongly for Donald Trump in two elections. The election of J.D. Vance, I think, is also a very good sign. But beyond that, Nixon used to be able to do this arithmetic in his head. You need to get to 270 electoral votes. I don't see how we do it without Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina. And those are the best three prospects you have in terms of actually getting election law reform.
Roger, who does the Democratic Party run next?
No, I have an unconventional view on that. I still believe that at the end of the day, their 2024 nominee will be Michelle Obama. I think that the machinery of the Democratic Party continues to be controlled by the Obamas. Barack Obama is a very, very popular figure, both in the country and in the party, as is his wife. I think they are dominant at the grassroots of the party. They tried to inflate the candidacy of Kamala Harris early on. It failed. They tried to inflate the candidacy of Cory Booker early on. That also failed. Believe me, they are painfully aware of the limitations of Joe Biden, both as a candidate and as a president. But they also recognize that the nomination of Bernie Sanders, who they cheated out of the nomination now twice, would have been an election a disaster of McGovern type proportions. And therefore, they needed somebody to stand in that breach. And the last man standing turned out to be Joe Biden. There is this epic interview with President Obama where he says, when he's asked about a third term, he says, "Yeah, I've thought about that. How great it would be if I could just be in the basement and whoever was president would have, like a microphone, so I could just speak to the microphone. He would have a hearing device, and I could run the country." I kind of think that's what's happening today, and I think that John Durham's final report is going to be devastating for Hillary Clinton. The Clinton-Obama rivalry inside the Democratic Party is very real. I think Hillary Clinton is done as a political force. The idea that she would mount another campaign, she clearly sees the weakness in Joe Biden, but I don't see her attempting to run again. I don't think the Obamas would allow it. I think that whether Joe Biden can even finish his term remains to be seen. I don't wish any ill health on him, but he clearly appears to me to be failing. And between the weight of the investigations into his son, his own health, and the fact that on occasions he can't seem to string together a sentence, and the impact of his policies on the economy, at a certain point, I question whether they remove him themselves under the 25th Amendment for reasons of health, or whether he steps down, allowing Kamala Harris to become president. She would be constitutionally next in line. She would be an inherently weak candidate. At that point, you'd have a vice presidential vacancy. She would have the authority to appoint a vice president, but subject to a confirmation by the U.S. Senate. Who she might pick remains to be seen. Look, this is all idle speculation, but their strongest candidate for 2024 would be Michelle Obama. She is not out doing book signings and voter registration drives for no reason. There's a great new book entitled Michelle Obama 2024, also a companion documentary called Michelle Obama 2024, both by Joel Gilbert, who's a very able writer and a filmmaker. I would urge people to check it out. I've interviewed him on my show, The Stone Zone, which again you can see at stonezone.live at 5 o'clock Eastern every weekday. But that's who I think the Democrats will ultimately end up with as their nominee. And it would be a mistake to not think that she would be extraordinarily formidable as a candidate, as
No,
she
that's
would.
right. I agree with you. I think that would be the toughest person to beat if Trump gets the nomination.
What about
Also,
Gavin Newsom?
adding validation to your theory, Roger. I don't know if you saw in the Twitter files, the fifth dump that Barry Weiss published on her feed the other day, they were talking about how the deplatforming of President Donald Trump was urged at the request of the Obamas, specifically Michelle Obama. So it just further validates, your claim that the Obamas are kind of running the country. It's a shadow government in the background.
I mean, you just have to look at this interesting meeting that they had at the White House where Obama came to speak and Biden was there, and all the Democrats were flying around the Obamas and Biden was left alone in a corner somewhere. I mean, if that's not indication enough for who's running things, then I don't know what is.
Well, he's in Delaware almost every week. He's barely at the White House. I mean, they won't even classify who Biden is meeting with. They won't provide public data on this. So, this is the public president of the United States, and we don't know who he's meeting with in his Delaware home almost on a weekly basis.
And they've also been caught with CGI simulations too. I mean, I know that sounds really kooky, and it's not a conspiracy theory. And they were caught building out a set to make it look like the White House. I don't know if you recall this, but it caused quite a social media frenzy a couple months ago. And then people were wondering if they were doing that in his own home, since he was spending so much time in Delaware as opposed to the White House.
Anyway, on that note, let me thank everybody for tuning in. I thank Kim again for setting this up. I very much appreciate this. It's been a great experience. It doesn't always work out this way, but this has been terrific, and I thank anybody who tuned in for this session. With that, I'm going to have a extremely dry martini, and then I'm going to bed.
Well, thank you for your time, Roger. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Roger.
It's good stuff.
Hey, Ian.
Go extremely dry, Roger.
Hey, Ian. While this is still going for a second, I kind of wanted to just raise this question. I was listening a lot, and I felt like I heard Florida getting bashed a lot. Everyone, the GOP wants to win, right? We got a problem with the national GOP. We got a problem with Georgia. We got a problem with the Arizona GOP. Why doesn't anyone? Why is the Trump circle so focused on undermining all the success that has happened in Florida under the Florida GOP?
Because they're terrified of DeSantis. I mean, they're not terrified of Kristi Noem.
And I get it, but
else.
When is people going to just kind of call a strike?
People aren't terrified of Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis
yes,
is undermining Donald Trump, and that's
no,
what
they're not.
About. So we need to
no.
have an honest conversation about the fact that Ron DeSantis is an ingrate, and he owes his entire political career to Donald Trump. And everybody knows that he wants to run for president, and that's what this is about.
Okay.
So
hey, Laura,
that's what it's about.
1 second. Okay, I hear you on all of that, but you can't argue fact. And the fact is, the Republican Party of Florida has led the way. And now, Laura, Raja, and many others are undermining all of that. But then they tell me that they want to win. What do you want to do? Do you want to go look to the...
We're not undermining anything.
I think Roger, with all due respect, I think Roger, has a lot more political experience, given the fact that, he is the person who got President Donald Trump elected as president. I think he knows what he's doing a lot more than you. So, I don't think that you are.
Hold on.
Think,
okay,
and it's
Laura,
really funny. It's really funny that you said this when Roger Stone left. I noticed that you didn't have the balls to say this. You didn't have the balls to say this when Roger was in the room. Why is that? You waited till Roger left the room. You certainly wouldn't have said this while Roger was in the room.
But let's be fair. Listen, Brendan, I'm going to say one thing because I'm not as extreme on this as Laura is. I think Ron DeSantis is a great governor, but we have to be honest. He exists because of Trump. He was losing in the primary. The endorsement was there. He campaigned for him in the general, brought him into office. If Donald Trump is not president and Hillary Clinton is president, Florida never reopens. She uses the full authority of the federal government to shut Florida down. DeSantis, all his positions, whether it's the flying the immigrants to Martha's Vineyard, the border, big tech, they're all derivative of Trump. Nothing is new. He has never spoken once about corruption in the alphabet agencies. Initially, he's always, he just like the vaccine issue, he also promoted it. He also shut down businesses. Yes, he opened, but the only reason he existed in this climate is because of Trump. And to look at the win, he was supposed to win regardless. But you forget that people in blue cities and blue states where I'm from fled New York and New Jersey, First, because of the salt tax issue. Second, because of COVID tyranny. So these numbers were padded from people, millions fleeing to Texas and Florida from New Jersey,
But
Connecticut, New York,
Yes.
California,
you
etc.
guys are
I to date
deflecting.
still have not.
And to go
DeSantis in
off of what you
Congress.
just said, I think that what you just said is great, and I agree with everything you said. I don't know what your first name is. I just see your handle Prodigal. So I think everything that you said is 100% spot on. But I will say, Brendan, you're talking about how
You're
we're
deflecting.
undermining.
You're
We're
deflecting.
undermining.
And
No,
Laura,
you're saying
you
that
said that Trump
you're
owes
saying
Roger
Wait, so
everything.
Brendan,
Okay, I'm just muting everyone for a second because let's all chill down. Let's all, take it
Yeah,
a bit
DeSantis
easier.
versus Trump. I mean, it's a hot topic issue.
Yeah, but so I'm going to unmute everyone now, but just chill for a moment. And Brandon, it's not a good look talking over a woman here. Let Laura say her piece and then you reply. How about that?
Yeah, I was letting her speak, but she cut
And
me off.
I'll just say to you that, you make the argument that, okay, well, Florida led the way, and you're making the argument that Florida led the way because of Ron DeSantis. Well,
I
how
never
did Ron DeSantis get elected in the first place? He got elected because Donald Trump came in and saved his ass when he almost had his ass beat by a closeted homosexual crackhead named Andrew Gillum. Okay, do I need to remind everybody that, the race was only 32,000 votes? That was the difference between Florida being a lockdown state. So let's stop pretending like Governor Ron DeSantis doesn't need Donald Trump. Okay, he needed Donald Trump in order to become the governor of Florida. And Florida is the free state of Florida today only because of Donald Trump. So I think that Ron DeSantis needs to get off his high horse. He's allowed himself to get an overinflated ego. And personally, I am looking forward to the day that he gets on a debate stage with Donald Trump so that Donald Trump can put him in his place and crush him. Okay? Because he really does need to be reminded of where he came from.
and the only thing I'll add to that is the same people who built him a presidential war chest are the same people who hung out Blake Masters to dry, Joe Kent to dry, and a lot of other candidates. And they put it into a state that we were going to win regardless, and they let all these other right-wing populists die when the general election came. And then immediately the media and McCarthy and McConnell turned all of their attention towards Trump and this narrative. And DeSantis tried to pretend he was above the fray. That money was given for a reason. Everybody knows why it was given. And for him to pretend otherwise is just disingenuous. I have no problem with him running. I think it'll be good to have Trump answer questions regarding COVID policies, how his second term is going to be different. And if DeSantis runs, let him answer. What are you going to do about the alphabet boys? What are you going to do about the military?
Okay, and now, Brandon, if you would like to respond, go ahead. And no one interrupt him, please.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, right? I feel like a lot of words were put into my mouth. I'm not sitting here telling you that endorsement didn't help Ron DeSantis. No, I'm not saying that. That's fact. Ron DeSantis got a major boost by Trump's endorsement in the primary in 2018. That's just fact. It is true. But to sit here and discredit what the Republican Party of Florida and what Governor Ron DeSantis has done these past couple of years, you got a net gain of 500,000 Republican registered voters over Democrats to take the lead. And listen, like, I'm just saying, I want to win. President Trump, he wants to win. Everyone wants to win. So I'm not saying go and kiss up to Ron DeSantis. I'm saying go look at what Florida and the GOP as a whole, it's a team effort. Ron DeSantis is the leader here in the state, but it's a team effort. Look at what they're doing. What is it that they are doing that they are able to flip just about everything? We got super majorities in the House, the Senate. We got the no statewide Democrats. My question to the Trump loyalists is, why can't we look at that if we really want to win?
It's the economy, though. I mean, I've been living here 10 years. It's the economy. And he got a lot of tailwind from COVID, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. I mean, you name it, people came here. We've had the greatest influx of people coming all the way from California than in the history of the state of Florida.
And
because
they
of
were all
COVID.
mostly Republican voters. So let's be honest.
Exactly. And, I wouldn't exactly say that Governor Ron DeSantis is super MAGA. I mean, his policies regarding COVID, sure, with Florida, when you compare other states to Florida, certainly, we opened up faster than other states. But I would say that Governor Ron DeSantis is a bit of a showboater. I mean, when you look at what he says publicly about his COVID policies, let's take a look. He said that he wasn't going to purchase the vaccinations for children in the state of Florida. And then he did this whole thing, and you'll know this, Brendan, because you have, what is the name of your media company here in the state of Florida? You have a media company, and you're always at his press conferences. And you'll probably remember when he said, "I'm so proud to be the only governor in the entire country that is saying no to the pharmaceutical companies to order these vaccines for COVID for children." And then he sat back and he soaked up all the good press. And then a few days later, what did he do? He quietly ordered all those vaccines for children to get the COVID vaccine, just like he did with his little tech bill, right? I would know because I was the only deplatformed candidate. You know how humiliating that was to be the only candidate in the nation banned on all social media, denied access, while Ron DeSantis went on Tucker Carlson and lied through his teeth like a liar, telling everybody that big tech social media companies were going to be punished financially. I mean, the guy is not who he says he is. His biggest donor is Ken Griffin, who was just quoted in Politico a few weeks ago saying that he owns Ron DeSantis. Look it up. You'll see it. He owns Ron DeSantis and that he purchased Ron DeSantis for the sake of eliminating Trumpism from the Republican Party and realigning the GOP with multinational corporate interests. That's what Ron DeSantis represents. So, yeah, I don't support Ron DeSantis. I voted for him for governor, and I participated in the recount, and Rush Limbaugh, before he passed away, rest in peace, credited my investigation when I discovered the box of ballots in the back of the rental car at the Fort Lauderdale airport with saving his election. I'm not going to vote for Charlie Crist, obviously, because I'm not a communist. But do I like Ron DeSantis? No. Do I think he has integrity? Absolutely not. And I will not be supporting him if he runs against Donald Trump. And I would just ask for people to actually look at his record as opposed to his bloviation during his press conferences. And I say that as a Floridian and a two-time congressional candidate who has been totally screwed over by Ron DeSantis. And his silence while my campaign was silenced by big tech.
Listen, there's a democratic process here. Ron DeSantis is not a dictator. He can't just sit here and wave a magic wand and hold everyone accountable. A bill was drafted. He signed it into law. It is now being challenged in the courts. To say that Ron DeSantis is the one that failed you, hold on. There's a democratic process still in play here for that bill. And we got session coming up in March, so maybe they can revisit it. I'm not sure if they're going to or not, but let's see what ends up happening. I'm just saying that.
But he didn't even issue a statement, though. It's not like there's a million candidates. I'm literally the only candidate, and there's only two candidates in the country that this would even apply to, myself and then Donald Trump. And now Elon Musk, of course, has reinstated our Twitter accounts. But it wouldn't have taken much for Ron DeSantis, and it's not like he doesn't know who I am. My campaign manager was Marianne Pastilli. You want to talk about how Florida had so many votes, and Florida had so many voter registrations? Well, guess who did that? That was my campaign manager, who was offered the state director position before she resigned, so that she could come work on my campaign. Sorry, I'm out of breath and need some water. Because you can't work on a campaign while also working for the Republican Party of Florida. So I don't need to be dictated. I'm not, trying to attack you, but I certainly don't need to be lectured about the Republican Party of Florida in the process. I wouldn't exactly say that the executives at the Republican Party of Florida, who are known for treating their staffers like total shit, are the people getting the job done. No, it's the field staff who are actually the people getting the job done. And everybody who works at the RPOF knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's why they have such a large turnover rate.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is that, Scott Pressler, how much time did he spend in Florida? And the same people we're trying to show, sold out the populace in midterms, she hasn't even reached out to him, right? So to say, to place all success solely on the attributes of DeSantis. Let's remember, when he was in Congress, he wanted to stay in Afghanistan. He voted for TPP. In that provision, It would have allowed the executive unilaterally to expand immigration without Congress's authority. So, like,
That's
there
actually
are
true. His
serious
congressional
questions.
record kind of sucks.
My last point here is the reason why some of us are angry is because I've seen a concerted effort from the same people who sabotage Trump's first term to get the former president of the United States not even to run. The same money backing a different candidate, trying to split the base, trying to do whatever else. He's free to run. But let's not lie that as soon as midterms were done, there was a conservative push basically to say, Trump, you shouldn't even run. You don't deserve to run. It should be left to the voters. If DeSantis wants to enter the primary, so be it. Let the best man win.
Listen, to be absolutely clear, I love the fact that Trump is running. I was at his announcement at Mar-a-Lago. I'm excited for him. And I agree with you, Project Cole. It's like, let the voters decide. And I'm not
Do you
sitting here
endorse
saying,
him, though? Do you endorse him over
I'm
DeSantis?
a reporter. I don't endorse anyone. That's
I'm
like
a
not.
reporter, too. I'm an investigative reporter, and I fully endorse Donald
Well,
Trump over Ron DeSantis.
That's on you. For me, I'm just not going to endorse. It's like, let the best man win. I think we are very blessed as a party to have such great candidates in both those men. But my point being, and yeah, if Prodigal, I would encourage you to follow my news outlet, Florida's Voice. We've credited Scott Pressler up and down. That guy is magic. That guy is the epitome of what the GOP party should be. Get out to vote and get the registration. And fact is fact. Here in Florida, they did that. That's my only point. I'm not saying Ron DeSantis. I'm not saying the executives of the GOP. I'm just saying here in Florida, we got a lot of good GOP clubs. We got a lot of great volunteers, people who are motivated, and they got the people out to vote, and they flipped voter registrations. 500,000 net gain in the last 4
Yeah, I know
years.
some of those people. Yeah, they're good people. They do a
Yeah,
lot of
I'm
ground
just
work. They don't go online. They do a lot of just grassroots stuff. Yeah.
they volunteer their time, and Scott is literally like is the voice of those people. And I'm just saying, that's happening here in Florida. I want to replicate that everywhere without undermining that great cause. Because if you, my final point, and I'm done. I got all my points out. Is when everyone is just completely on the offense of Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, it undermines the hard work of those individuals. That's my final point.
Well, I would say that you can be critical of Ron DeSantis and also get voter turnout. I'm very critical of Ron DeSantis, and I had the highest voter turnout out of any county in the state of Florida. I won the Villages and Sumter County, which was in District 11. My campaign volunteers and my staff that worked 18-hour shifts with me in the hot Florida sun, grassroots work that you're talking about. We had the largest voter turnout out of any county in Central Florida. So I certainly know exactly what you're talking about, but two things can be true at the exact same time.
Laura, I wish you'd won, just to wipe the smug grin off of those
Well, I did
now
win.
fired people.
I did win, but that's the thing, right? I thought Ron DeSantis had an election crime unit. I thought that he actually wanted to take voter fraud seriously, right? I thought he wanted to take election interference seriously. When you look at the fact that my election was only less than 6,000 votes, that was the difference, right? Less than 6,000 votes. And I ran against a practical dementia patient. And the only Republican who skipped the vote on the January 6th committee, Daniel Webster, and one of the only Republicans who skipped the vote on the second impeachment of President Donald Trump and voted to send $40 billion to Ukraine, right? A total rhino. It really kind of just makes you wonder why Ron DeSantis, when you're talking about Republican clubs, the Villagers for Trump is the largest Republican club in the state of Florida, but you probably know that, Brendan. So the fact of the matter is they passed an entire resolution at Villagers for Trump contesting my election, saying that they believe that my election was stolen. And they sent it to Governor Ron DeSantis's office, asking him in his election crime office that he constantly talks about to investigate the fraud in my election. And he refused to do it, just like he refused to investigate the fact that I was the only candidate denied equal access to have campaign social media accounts. So, I'm not just here making false accusations against Ron DeSantis. We have signed affidavits, okay? We have criminal activity from Alan Hayes, a Republican supervisor of elections in the Lake County Supervisor of Elections office, who accepted $200,000 from Mark Zuckerberg, okay, Zuckerbucks, and he was illegally electioneering, telling people to vote for Daniel Webster inside the office. That's a crime. And we had affidavits sent to Governor DeSantis's office, and he didn't do anything about it. Why? Oh, well, because when he was a member of Congress, who was in the office across the hall from him? Daniel Webster. So I don't want to be told that Governor Ron DeSantis is some upstanding guy when he refuses to address voter fraud that's happening in Republican primaries. He wants to talk about voter fraud that's happening in Orange County. Well, that's funny because Orange County is exactly where my election was stolen. He doesn't want to talk about the voter fraud when it happens in a Republican primary, but he'll talk about it when it happens to the Democrats. Why? It's just ridiculous. So, you are a reporter, and I would encourage you to perhaps do a story about this. And if you're interested, I'm happy to connect you with my legal team, right? I'm happy to connect you with my volunteers and the individuals that filed a lawsuit and contested the election, because nobody else in the media or the Republican Party wants to talk about it. In fact, you're talking about the Republican Party of Florida. They contacted every single FEC lawyer in the state of Florida and had them blackball me so that I couldn't even get representation when I wanted to contest my election. So talk about a story, right? And this is what's happening here in the state of Florida under Governor DeSantis's watch, and absolutely nothing's being done about it. So I think I have a right to be pissed off. For 5 years, I've been screaming at the top of my lungs about big tech social media censorship, being mocked by Republicans, warning them about what everybody's talking about now in these Twitter files, and nobody has done anything to help me. And so I've dedicated over 4 years of my life running for office, and I would be in Congress right now if it wasn't for being deplatformed. And I have asked Governor Ron DeSantis to speak up for me. I'm not asking him to endorse me. I simply asked him
Laura,
to speak
you
up.
certainly just a
Why do
second.
you think he doesn't help you?
I simply asked him to speak up and condemn the censorship and election interference. I would expect any governor who cared about election integrity to do it. Even if I was a Republican governor, if I was Governor Ron DeSantis, and then there was a Democrat candidate, I would speak up for them because that's the right thing to do. I'm not even a Democrat, right? I'm a Republican. So the fact of the matter is,
but why do you think Ron didn't support
because
your
I don't
step up?
think he actually cares about election integrity. I don't think he actually cares about big tech social media censorship. And I judge people by their actions. And the fact that he hasn't done anything to address these issues, I can actually say those things. I actually have put my money where my mouth is. I've raised over $1 million by myself through the help of grassroots, donations from patriots all across the country. And I filed multiple lawsuits in the state of Florida against big tech. I currently have a RICO case. And look, I've tried to get meetings with Governor Ron DeSantis. We've submitted this information to his press office. Nobody ever gets back to me. And it's not like they don't know who I am. Okay. They all know who I am in Florida and Tallahassee. I see Matt Gaetz's press secretary on this call too, right? They all know who I am. So it's not like Governor DeSantis doesn't know who I am. I've asked him questions before when he's come to the villages. He was in the villages for an event, and I stood up and asked him about whether he was going to divest Twitter stock before Elon Musk had actually purchased Twitter. And then he dodged my question, of course, when I asked him about the fact that Twitter was disenfranchising voters in Florida by banning my campaign from having access. And he didn't want to answer the question. So we dodged it.
Laura, let me say something.
By the way, I don't do comms for Ron DeSantis. I do comms for Matt Gaetz.
I said Matt Gaetz. I said Matt Gaetz.
All right. So
he endorsed you.
Let me say something.
That's not what I said.
Laura,
I said I see Matt Gaetz as press secretary on here. I was just noting that you work with a Florida politician.
Okay, copy. It should be noted that you are the most censored woman on the internet.
Hello.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you, Joel.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, very good. So let me say something. Laura, you sound like you are on fire. Whatever happened to you, the injustice that you have experienced, my God, look what it turned you into. And now you're back on social media. You will run again and you will win because you have so much fire and you're so eloquent and so sharp. Just take this as a lesson. But look what it turned you into. You are a beast, and I would recommend that you run again. And I want to close the space down because Roger Stone is gone. We had a nice little chat after he left, and I think it's time to close this up so people can access the recording. I've had a couple of DMs from people that want to access the recording who came in a bit late, so I want to give them that opportunity. I think what everyone should think about with what Elon is doing on Twitter and Twitter files and what he's saying and what he's doing, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future we may see Elon Musk in politics as well. And that would be a very exciting turn of events. So I want to close by saying that. And I wish you all a very good night or a very good day wherever you are. And tune in next time when we have another space. And once the recording is up, make sure to share it with your friends and let them listen to this exciting discussion that we had today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good one.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks.